the path of least resistance, most of us would prefer to take the way that's easy and that doesn't require a lot of extra effort. And that's understandable. But when it's your job to inform people or at least give them enough information that they can make a reasonably informed decision, that's not the time to take the path of least resistance. And unfortunately, as you're going to see, it's something our media has kind of developed a habit of doing, especially here lately.
Press Club are biased all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Once again, welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde, and my job a couple times a week is to sit down and go over certain stories or certain issues that are not getting full coverage from our legacy media. Now, before I go a step further, I got to share a little experience with you because I had my 40-year class reunion last weekend, and one of the people that I ran into, unbeknownst to me, is someone whose work that I've been criticizing for, well, for as long as I've been doing Nowhere to Hide. Now, I'm not criticizing him directly, but he is the producer of a very popular news series on one of the Boise television stations, and he's very good at what he does. He's not the host, and I will maintain the host, I think, still deserves sometimes some well-deserved criticism for some pretty obvious bias that creeps through. But it was really funny when my friend said, hey, I've been watching your work, and it took me a minute to realize that, oh my gosh, this is the guy who produces the 208. And I have to say, he's a marvelously talented person, but he's a good person above all. And I say this because just because I'm criticizing media, and I'm going to give you some examples that I think are very worthy of criticism, I don't want to give the impression that everybody's that way. Oh yeah, they're all the enemy, and you can't trust anybody. The fact of the matter is there are good people within the legacy media. Now, I happen to be of the opinion that to really go someplace, to get ahead in the legacy media, you kind of have to be willing to toe a certain line. And so it can be hard for those really good people who, by good, I mean fair, balanced, not out there to impose a particular agenda for your own good, but who are actually there to try to help you get a better understanding of the world around you. So I just wanted to start with that short reminder. There really are good people. And I think that by the way, my friend and I had a great time talking. We each took a picture of each other to send back to our higher ups and say, hey, look who I found. Look who I've been hanging out with. But we shouldn't be too enemy driven when it comes to, who's reporting the news and why we don't agree with them. If anything, what it should do is instead spur us to be more serious about how am I going to go about vetting the news and getting good information, doing my own fact checking so that I can't be misled. So with that in mind, of course, there was something else that happened this last weekend. Perhaps you heard of it. There was an attempt on the life of former President Trump. And this is a really interesting illustration of legacy media versus social media. Now, when the incident happened, my first clue was I got a call from a friend who said, hey, have you heard what happened? He told me the basics of it. And I was just like, holy cow. What's the first place I went? Not to legacy media. And I'm glad I didn't, because the legacy media had a very difficult time. Now, please understand, it sounds like I'm throwing everybody under the bus here, but in reality, I'm just pointing out that for the longest time, like the last 9 years, to be more specific, legacy media has led the charge to destroy the character, reputation, and life of one Donald J. Trump. I'm not a MAGA kind of guy. I don't fly a MAGA flag. I don't wear a Make America Great Again hat. But I know when somebody's getting a raw deal, and I've watched it from a front row seat very closely for the last 9 years. And so when it came out that a would-be assassin had taken a shot at Trump and actually injured him, the legacy media was curious in how it framed the story. Let me give you an example of what that looked like. This is just a sampling of headlines. These are some of the more irresponsible headlines that popped up. Here we have the Washington Post, Trump escorted away after loud noises at PA rally. ABC News, Donald Trump escorted off stage by Secret Service during rally after loud noises ring out in crowd. They don't want to call it what it was, right? NBC, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after popping noises heard at his Pennsylvania rally. That's getting a little closer to the truth. Then Newsweek, MAGA responds with outrage after Donald Trump injured at Pennsylvania rally. How unreasonable of them. They responded with outrage when someone tried to blow his head off. How about USA Today? Trump removed from stage by Secret Service after loud noises startle former president and crowd. But the winner of the absolute most crass headline has to be CNN, Secret Service rushes Trump off stage after he falls at rally. Now look, anybody who was watching on social media, particularly X, formerly Twitter, knew that there was, in fact, shots fired. The Secret Service rushed and surrounded him. The iconic moment of Trump emerging from, that cluster of Secret Service agents with his fist clenched and telling people, fight, fight, fight. Blood running down his face. That's a pretty iconic thing. And frankly, I think it was something that the mainstream media really didn't know how to report. But isn't it interesting that while mainstream news outlets sat back and, well, we don't want to report something that isn't factually correct, it's because they didn't know how to fit the narrative, which is he is an evil monster who is going to destroy everything that's precious. He's going to destroy our democracy, right? That's been the mantra. And Joe Biden, President Biden, has led out with this. So it left them with a bit of a conundrum. And by the way, big social media platforms like, for instance, Facebook and others, also kind of sat back on it too. They didn't really want to commit to saying what people dang well knew they had seen. So who was left? Well, X was actually the place to go. And I want you to see this quote from Jeffrey Tucker, which I think sums up why free speech actually beats throttled speech anytime, even if that throttled speech is for our own protection. Now, this was written the day after the assassination attempt. But Jeffrey Tucker says the last 24 hours of X has provided a great example of the workings of free speech. Nonsense has appeared and plenty of wrong information. Okay, he's right. It has also been corrected and replaced by correct information so far as we know it in real time and much earlier than the censored platforms. The bottom line is people can manage. This is one of the reasons why I won't watch much in terms of mainstream media, because I understand that, look, for the vast majority of these outlets, they have a particular agenda. There's a particular narrative that they have to cling to. And as far as Trump goes, orange man bad, and anything else we say, is good. So with that in mind, you've just seen tangible evidence that some were willing to take this to ridiculous extremes. It's not like people couldn't figure out that there was something really strange taking place there. But there's this attitude of you can't handle the truth. You're no truth handler. I deride your truth handling abilities. The fact of the matter is you can handle the truth, but for some reason, you're going to have to go after it yourself. If you rely on the press to give it to you, they're not going to do it. Here's another example, and this is from the Idaho Capital Sun. Look at the headline here. ACLU of Idaho asks federal judge to halt law banning gender care for those in prison. So in other words, there are inmates who want to change their gender. So the Roe v. Labrador lawsuit, and this is the important part here, filed on behalf of what? Transgender women. Look, if they were really women, you wouldn't have to qualify it with the transgender. In Idaho prisons who say withheld medication violates the Eighth Amendment. We have a right to force the taxpayers to pay for our gender transition or gender surgery or whatever it is that they want. Now, maybe I'm quibbling at this, but look, they could just as easily have said, in fact, let me pull that headline back up again. Roe v. Labrador lawsuit filed on behalf of transgender individuals in Idaho prisons who say withheld medication violates Eighth Amendment. But no, I mean, it would have been accurate. They are individuals. And whatever, you know that transgender is a part of the equation, but they have to try to reinforce that they're women. They are. You can't believe anything else except, that these are transgender women. This is what I mean by that path of least resistance. Although in this case, it seems to me it takes a lot of extra steps and a lot of extra effort for the media to maintain this front that says, though you have to believe this and you have to believe that if they say they're women, they are. That's asking you and me as viewers and as consumers of their product to defy reality, to ignore reality. Does that seem like a healthy way to go about things? When someone is telling you to disregard reality, isn't the term for that gaslighting? When they're trying to convince you what you think you see, that's not real. You're crazy. I mean, that's classic gaslighting. So I've given you some examples of this. And again, my goal here is not to tell you, so therefore, anybody you see who works in the legacy media, you should be throwing trash at them and shouting at them as they walk down the street. I don't believe that at all. I go back to my meeting with my friend, and it was just such a great opportunity to see and to be reminded. And sometimes I need this too. There are good people working within the media, but as a whole, as an institution, you're not going to get the truth unless you are willing to go after it yourself. And sometimes that means you have to be willing to defy some of the current narratives, even though there's a possibility you might be called a bad person for doing so. I'm encouraging you, do it anyway. There's a certain comfort. It's not so much about being right as it is about just knowing that the truth matters more to you than putting up some appearance of, oh, look, I'm inclusive. I'm so compassionate. So something to think about there. One final note, and this is something, again, we're going to be hearing a lot about between now and November, since ranked choice voting in the form of open primaries is going to be on the ballot. Nicholas Kleinworth, writing for the Idaho Freedom Foundation, shared a story last week about a $40 million drain on taxpayers. This is the unintended cost that is going to come along with ranked choice voting. And let's just go through this list very quickly. Nicholas says, ranked choice voting will cost Idahoans more than merely their time and patience in managing its complexities. In fact, about $40 million more. This news comes to the legislature from the Office of the Secretary of State, revealing the true costs and practical challenges of the new proposal up for consideration before Idaho voters this November. Now, he says Idaho has a tradition of local control over election decisions. Each county has the power to decide how to best administer their elections based on their needs within the confines of approved voting systems as well as state law. So, well, it sounds like a great system. We have to improve that, say certain people. Now, states like Alaska have implemented ranked choice voting systems similar to the one being proposed or being considered here in Idaho. However, the differences between Idaho and these other states pose substantial cost to the gem state if it is to avoid compromising election integrity. Nicholas writes that Idaho's existing approved voting systems cannot accommodate a ranked choice election. This will require counties to purchase new voting equipment. And the SOS letter, Secretary of State letter, estimates this could cost taxpayers up to $40 million. Oh, hey, we're good for it, right? Only the best for us voters, paid for by us taxpayers. Further, the ranked choice voting scheme will require additional spending to support voter education in the new system. It's not something you're just going to intuitively figure out when you get there. The letter notes that shifting from selecting one candidate to ranking the preference among 4 candidates is significant enough that it would not be intuitive to all voters. In Alaska, their elections office spent $3.5 million to educate about 594,000 voters. Idaho has just over 1 million voters. So assuming the same cost per voter, a statewide comprehensive voter education effort will cost nearly $5 million. Now, the SOS letter also notes other costs that are difficult to quantify. One challenge under a ranked choice voting system is Idaho's decentralized administration of elections would prevent expedient tallying of races that cross county lines. So the costs described in the SOS letter are far above the original estimates of $1.6 million. This means the Secretary's estimates are roughly 25 times higher than expected, a massive increase that doesn't even capture all of those costs that can't be quantified yet. Now, the original fiscal note on the initiative could not contemplate purchasing new equipment, revising tabulation patterns, and updating software. The fiscal note also did not consider the cost of a public awareness campaign. So beware when you're being sold, hey, this is the latest thing since sliced bread. It's ranked choice voting, and it's exactly what Idaho voters need. Maybe this is just the mindset of statists. When you see something simple, particularly something you can't co-opt because it's simple and therefore pretty tough to tamper with, you complicate it. And that appears to be what they're trying to do with ranked choice voting, which will be on the ballot this fall. Something to think about. So when it comes to the path of least resistance, look, it's a fair bet that much of the legacy media is going to take that path when it comes to reporting information to you. They'll tell you exactly what you need to know in their estimation. You and I cannot afford to take the path of least resistance. Sharpen those thinking skills and do not allow yourself to be fooled. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Press Club or bias all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our